Namaskar, my name is Poonam Gulalia. On behalf of Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education, we are bringing these videos to you for your learning, for your professional growth and for your onward fieldwork journey. The fieldwork experiences of students, the lived experiences of practitioners and the sharing through these videos we hope will enable you to understand from the field, to engage with the field and to learn the skills necessary for being a practicing professional. Today's topic is strengths-based approach in social work practice. So why are we talking today about strengths-based approach? What is its utility? What are its features? How can we work around using a strengths-based approach with people in the field, whether we are working with individuals, we are working with groups or we are working with communities? Where and how can we use a strengths-based approach? That is essential for us to understand. So the basic features of strengths-based approach are as follows. 1. The attempt is to focus on the clients or the client groups, personal assets, relational assets and community assets. So if there is a target group or a target population, if there is a beneficiary group, if there are individuals who are reaching out to us for help, if there are groups, whether they are self-help groups or Mahila Mandals or youth groups, or if there are residential settings where or daycare centers where people of a particular section of society like adolescents or elders are staying in those residential homes, there could be any and every kind of situation where a strengths-based approach can be used in enabling people to solve their problems, in enabling them to use their assets, in enabling them to understand their potential, in enabling them to utilize their resources. So the strengths-based approach in social work practice is a holistic, collaborative approach to working with people in the field. Being a holistic approach, the attempt is for us as student social workers, as trainee social workers, to identify the inner and the outer resources of people. So it could be the inner and outer resources of individuals, it could be the inner and outer resources of groups, it could be the inner and outer resources of communities. And that is the reason why different fields of practice are being mentioned, because you would be in different fieldwork settings. So it should be understood as an approach which can be practiced across settings, across sectors, across contexts. The underlying principle behind this approach is an attempt to promote resilience. What is the meaning of the term resilience? The ability to bounce back. So the ability of individuals to bounce back to their original selves, to their original personalities, to their original situations where they can take charge of their own lives and address their own issues and not be totally dependent on the social worker. To enable groups, to enable communities to do the same, to utilize their resources, to utilize their strengths, to be able to identify their strengths and then to utilize their strengths, to be able to identify resources and then to utilize the resources, to be able to identify situations, support systems, support networks and utilize them for their own welfare. So this is a holistic, person-centered perspective when we talk of strengths-based approach to social work practice. If we take an individual situation or a client situation, in working with people, in working with individuals, in casework practice, what is it that we can rely on? What do we call the strengths of the clients? The strengths include the individual talents, the individual abilities, the individual mindsets, the positive approach, the problem solving abilities which inherently are available in every individual. There is potential in every individual. It is the circumstances or the issues which arise in their lives which pull them down or cover their strengths or convert their strengths into limitations, or not enabling them to be able to identify their hidden potential or their hidden strengths. So, the client strengths include individual talents, individual abilities, which include problem solving abilities. It also includes the resources available in their support networks, the friends, neighbors, families, neighborhoods, local communities. So there is a lot of support system which is available for individuals. So the attempt is for the social worker to focus on what is strong and not what is wrong. So the pathological approach which was being practiced for a long time in terms of always seeing the problem situation, problem solving ability, it has its limitations. If we focus on the strengths of the client, if we focus on the strengths of the client populations, then the focus on what is wrong gets diminished and focus on what is strong can get enhanced. That is the approach, the understanding, the assumption and the underlying principle with which strengths-based approach is practiced in the field. So what does it require for a social worker to do? It requires that the social worker establish a collaborative relationship with the client, establish a partnership relationship with the group, establish a partnering relationship with the community. Depending on the situation, the collaboration, the networking, the partnership approach is encouraged. Assess the client's or the client group's strengths as the foundation for which social work intervention planning will take place. So the strengths focus, the features of the strengths-based perspective is such that it draws on certain models and theories, it avoids duplication of services to the clients or the client population, and it also contributes to development of grassroots community resources. So by focusing on the strength, by encouraging the focus on strengths, by culling out the strengths, we are giving the message to clients and client populations that we believe in your strengths, we would like to rely on your strengths, and we would like to develop these strengths so that you can use them as a future resource in due course of time. Right? So what are the three basic models of strengths-based practice which you might have read or learnt or been through, but it's good to emphasize it and reinforce it here so that the skills associated with these models can also be discussed and dwelt on. So the three models of strengths-based practice are as follows. The first one is asset-based community development. So in short, it's called ABCD, asset-based community development. The second is a little longer title, but it is called knowledge, values, ethics, theory and strengths. It is the second model. I am repeating, there is a slight error. The second model is called knowledge, values, ethics, theory and skills, and the third model is called local area coordination model. So these three models, whether they are being practiced here in our Indian context, has to be tried and tested. We have to find out ways to see whether we are practicing these but not calling it by its very name, but it's important to know and understand what it entails, because it will enable us in our fieldwork journey. So the first, which is ABCD, asset-based community development model, focuses on the clients and the client group's strengths in relation to their own network and in relation to the community resources which are available to them. It is based on 5 principles. What are these? One, it is led by its citizens. So it's led by the group themselves, by the client groups themselves. Second, it is relationship oriented. Third, it is based on assets. Fourth, it is based on the place, the location where the people or the community are located. And fifth, it is focused on being inclusive. So when we are speaking about the principles which asset-based community development model talks of, we are also talking about the skills required by the social worker if he, she or they are going to use these principles and use this model for practice. So what does it mean? That if it is going to be led by the people themselves, if it's going to be relationship focused and inclusive, it means that the partnership collaborative approach has to be practiced in reality and not in a superficial manner. The democratic approach, the belief that the client group and we are at par with each other in understanding the situation, in exchanging notes, in discussing the needs, in understanding the availability of resources available, in utilizing the resources available, and subsequently in using all these strengths and networks to solve the problems which have to be addressed by the client group themselves. So an empowerment approach is undertaken as a strengths-based model. The belief in empowerment, the belief in equity, the belief in equality, the belief in everyone having a voice, these are the principles and the basis for using an asset-based community development model as a strengths-based approach to social work. So having discussed the first model, we would now like to come to the second model, which is knowledge, values, ethics, theory and skills. This title itself entails an integration of theory and practice skills, an integration of ethics and values, an integration of knowledge and positive approach to solving issues in the field. So person-centered holistic ethical interventions, this is the premise on which this model has been designed. Person-centered holistic approach, person-centered holistic ethical interventions are undertaken. So values and ethics are given prime importance and human rights and social justice are upheld in using this model as a strengths-based model. It also entails that the skills required for practice work around the need for human rights and social justice. Sometimes in the field, students understand human rights and social justice differently because they come from different perspectives. They have different understandings. They have had their own lived realities. Some may be coming from marginalized backgrounds. Some may be coming from better off backgrounds. So this difference in perspective, in understanding, in approach, in the debate between what is right and wrong, in coming to a common understanding of rights and justice, sometimes becomes a bone of contention among student learners. And it's important, that's why, to discuss these in a collaborative approach with an open mind. We ourselves need to be inclusive of the other's point of view, right? And that is why again the importance of resilience arises, which we mentioned a little while ago. So resilience in human service workers, resilience in social workers, resilience in any caring profession, whether it's nursing or social work, has been defined as the ability to adapt to and to bounce back from difficult experiences. So we need to adapt to experiences which may be difficult for us at a given point in time, but we also need to bounce back and come to terms with what is the reality, being realistic in relation to our co-workers, in relation to our organizations where we work, and in relation to the client populations with whom we are engaging with. So it may not be an inherent personality trait for everyone. Resilience may not be an inherent trait with each one of us, but it can be built up over time. We can work around it. It can be nurtured, but it is an integral component of our skill that we need to nurture, along with other skills of listening or observation or communication or relationship building, right? Or self-awareness or self-care or analysis or critical thinking. Resilience is an equally important skill and is valuable in understanding this model of strengths-based approach to social work. The third model which is being discussed as a strengths-based model is called local area coordination. Again, it's a strengths-based approach. It relies on the strengths of the people in a particular locality. It focuses on relationship building, and generally we think of relationship building as being very simple and straightforward. But the fact is that relationship building requires not only a very basic understanding of human behavior and psychology, but also requires our understanding of how people's behavior, attitudes may change over time in different locations. Our approach to working with people requires that we be sensitive to changing moods of people, to changing nuances of their behavior, to the way they behave as individuals and the way that they may behave in groups, to the fact that team building also requires that we are different. The group dynamics plays out differently in different spaces, and all that we are learning in the classroom related to working with groups has to be put into practice in other spaces as well. So when we are practicing a strengths-based approach to social work, we need to remind ourselves about individual behavior, about group behavior, about group dynamics, about human behavior in different settings, and about the fact that we ourselves also change over time, adapt differently, relate differently with different people, and we ourselves also have our strengths and limitations which we need to be mindful of, which we need to revisit when we are working with people. That's why when we are talking about this model, the focus on relationship building and developing community networks sounds very simple, may appear very doable, but when we engage with it, we realize over time and with experience that building community networks means, again, there are people with different power positions. They are having their hierarchy of their own. Community, people living in communities have sometimes self-styled community leaders. Some are stated community leaders. Some are upcoming community leaders. Then we realize that there are key informants. Now, key informants again sometimes are in the formal framework and sometimes at the informal framework. So by the time we begin to understand and dissect very carefully that what are those networks, how do they function, do they function differently when I am working as a student social worker, do they function differently when someone else, my supervisor, is coming for a field visit, do they function differently when neither of us are there? All these become spaces for learning for a student social worker. So these person-centered services that we are talking of, they are co-created with the local communities. Local communities vary, and it is very simplistic to say that this is a rural background or this is an urban background or this is a tribal community. But even among rural, urban and tribal communities, the operationalization of community networks could be different, and it will take us some time as student social workers to understand these networks in our given context, and it's only through experiential learning, only through practice, only through engaging with the field that we will actually be able to understand the nitty-gritty of working with people. So these three models were very important for discussion. Also, having said that, it's important to explain that when we talk of community assets, what do we mean? Sometimes we think of community assets only in terms of buildings, infrastructure, schools, primary health centers, Anganwadi centers, parks, community centers, but it also includes animal care groups or some charitable groups which have been created, or cultural groups or recreational groups, religious groups, any special needs groups created for ability or disability related people living in the community, any education groups, any adolescent groups created around education needs, any health advocacy groups, any political organizations, of course, and there could also be other forms of social groups or union groups which are listed as part of community assets. So when we talk of resources, assets, we need to be careful in being sure that we have included all possible assets which are there existing in a big or in a small way. It's not necessary that the size or the magnitude of the groups only determines the assets available. Even if it is in any small way that groups have been created or people have come together to form associations or self-help groups or youth groups or Mahila Mandal, even if it is a small initiative, one needs to factor it in when one is looking at support networks, relationship building and community assets. What are the physical assets then which need to be stated, because sometimes we take these for granted when we are asked after returning from the field that what did you observe? Sometimes we forget to talk of the gardens, the parks, the playgrounds, the picnic area, the vacant land or any incomplete building, and these need to be factored in as physical assets which are part of the community infrastructure. The institutions which I have just mentioned could vary from community to community. So when we talk of assets, it could be a school, it could be a college, it could be a police department, there could be a hospital coming up, there could be a small library which people have initiated in someone's home, there could be a social service agency which has begun working in that area, or there could be NGOs which are already working in a particular setup. So these conversations become important in understanding the models of strengths-based approach, in understanding the need why strengths-based approach as practice in social work needs to be studied and strengthened, why it needs to be deliberated on, what are the skills required in undertaking a strengths-based approach, what is the belief we need to have that everything is not about a problem-solving situation, that we can rely on the strengths of people. So even when we undertake a needs assessment in the community, even if we undertake a needs assessment in an institution where we are working, a strengths-based approach can be used. We need to explore people's needs. We need to use the opportunity to identify their resources. The sources could be personal, they could be related to family, they could be related to community support, they could be related to friend circle. So there are many neighborhoods, there could be online groups where one is devising and getting support from. It's not necessary that everything needs to be in the physical arena of the client or the client population. In our networked world, a lot of support is available online and people have connected with each other. We need to utilize this understanding to understand the strengths which the client or the client population bring to the situation in enabling them to solve or resolve their issues. So we need to assess the risks and any crisis interventions which may be required even when we rely on a strengths-based approach. And also one needs to keep in mind that while looking at the short-term goals which we will be attempting, we need to pursue the long-term outcomes, the long-term goals and the planning required by drawing on personal strengths, by drawing on community strengths, by drawing on community networks and by drawing on personal networks. So, having said the basic requirements of strengths-based framework, there is something called a ROPES model, ROPES, which we could just mention and you could later on read about it, discuss it with your supervisors and see if it is being practiced in any of the settings where you are undertaking fieldwork. So what does ROPES stand for? R stands for resources, O for opportunities, P for possibilities, E for exceptions and S for solutions. So this ROPES model has been used to guide practitioners, including social work practitioners, in using strengths-based approach for assessment, intervention and planning. So resources, opportunities, possibilities, exceptions and finally solutions. So ROPES, when it talks about resources, what are the questions which are going to be asked if we are going to talk about resources? Some of the questions could be as follows. When doing assessment, we could ask, where do the client resources lie? What can they access today? Which of these resources can they access today, here and now? Who are their role models? What are their skills and interests? Are they involved in any community or religious involvement wherever they are? Do they have any regular family or friend get-togethers? Can they narrate any important family stories? All these become a segment of resources which are available to the client and also to the social worker to tap. When asking these questions, what is the content you think you are getting for assessment of their issues or concern? The content you are getting is either you are getting to know their personal and family relationships, also you are getting to understand their social environment, you are also beginning to understand the organizational involvement, because you are asking them that are you part of any family or friend get-togethers, are you enrolled in any cultural groups or any other groups, and that will enable you to understand their involvement in community. So this community involvement becomes equally important in understanding the resources available to the client or the client population. So what is the second O? The O stands for options. So what does that say? Having known what resources are available, what can be accessed now and what is available but not tried by the client or the client population. So when we ask what can be accessed now, the focus is on the present, and when we are asking what is available but not tried by the client or the client group, the emphasis is on choice. So what is available, what can be tried and tested. The third aspect in the ROPES model is P. P stands for possibilities. So what questions do you think we would be asking if we are trying to understand the possibilities? We are trying to look at the potential, how the client can be helped for the future. So when the issue has been resolved, what will the future look like? So what are the possibilities? And what has the client or the client group thought of trying but not tried yet? Again it talks of possibilities. So when we are asking this question, that we want to look at the potential, how the client can be prepared for the future, obviously the focus is on the future. And when we are asking, has the issue been resolved? When the issue has been resolved, what will the future look like? We are enabling the client to imagine what the future will look like. So it opens up possibilities for action. And the third aspect in possibilities is, what has the client or the client group thought of trying but not tried yet? Enables us to see the creativity and the vision with which the issue can be approached. In the last aspect of the ropes model, we have exceptions and solutions, the E and the S. So what do we ask when we try to understand what are the exceptions to the issue or the problem? We could ask, when is the problem not happening? When is the problem different? When is part of the hypothetical future occurring? And how has the client endured or thrived so far? How has the client overcome other adversaries, other problems, other issues which have come in his or her life? So what happens when we ask these sets of questions in enabling the client or the client group to move towards solutions? We are attempting to use the previous experience of solving problems. We are attempting to use previous sources of resilience of the client or the client group. And that is going to enable us to see the fluctuations in the severity or the nature of the problem with which the client or the client group has approached the social worker. Finally, how do we arrive at solutions? We ask simple questions. What's working now and what are your successes? What are you doing that you would like to continue doing? So we are identifying resources, identifying organizations, undertaking referral, and again asking, what if a miracle happened? And what can you do to create a miracle? Which means we are focusing on solutions. We are enabling the client or the client group to build on strengths and to foresee what is possible, to enabling them to garner their potential to problem solving or to enabling them to resolve the issue. In conclusion, I am leaving you with 3 questions which you can discuss, reflect on and bring for further discussion with your supervisors and your peers. The first question is, where can strengths-based approach be used in social work? Where can strengths-based approach be used? 2. How can strengths-based practice be useful in your work? How can strengths-based practice be useful in field work? And third, what are the advantages of using this approach? What are the advantages of using this strengths-based approach? If we can attempt to answer these 3 questions for ourselves, we will be able to see the value in what has been discussed so far and to enable you to use strengths-based approach in the field, to also encourage you to use the ropes model and to see how it works in your fieldwork journey. We wish you all the best and we are hopeful that you will utilize these videos for your own learning and for becoming a better practicing professional. All the best to each one of you. Thank you.